The dumplings my mom makes may look ordinary, but they cost $10,000 a bowl. Each customer who comes to the shop usually eats at least 5 bowls. Every time a new customer arrives, my sister's face shows more weariness, and her body grows weaker. My family runs a dumpling shop in the city center, which feels out of place compared to the surrounding upscale malls. When I was younger, I once asked my mom why we sold dumplings in the city center, where the rent is so expensive, and why we only sold pork dumplings instead of other types. I pouted and squinted at a plate of dumplings. She replied, "Sweetheart, because only those who have eaten at the nearby high-end malls can afford our dumplings. Besides, they only love our dumplings." Today, it's pouring rain outside, and there are a few pedestrians on the street, but I'm not worried about the shop being empty. Suddenly, a couple dressed in luxury brands walked into my dumpling shop with an umbrella. I had never seen them before. It must be their first time here. After the man sat down, he said to me, "Please bring 2 orders of pork dumplings." "Thank you." I nodded and hurried to the kitchen to tell my mom. But just as I walked back, I heard the man loudly complain with a look of disgust. "You brought me here just to eat dumplings? Which upscale restaurant nearby isn't better than this little shop? And why is it so expensive? Are these dumplings filled with gold?" I watched coldly from the side, and the woman noticed my gaze, instantly looking a bit guilty. She quickly covered the man's mouth to stop him from saying more. Then, leaning in close to the man, she whispered mysteriously, "What do you know? The dumplings from this shop are not ordinary." The man's interest was instantly piqued, and his expression turned curious. The woman continued, "I have a cousin who has been wanting to have a child but couldn't find out the reason at the hospital. She cares a lot about her appearance, spending millions on beauty treatments each year. But then an accident left her face ruined. Later, she heard that the dumplings from this shop were magical, claiming they could make you young and beautiful, and that eating them regularly could help you conceive. Although they are expensive at $10,000 a bowl, she decided to give them a try. To her surprise, her face improved significantly the very next day. She ate dumplings almost every day for nearly a month, and when I saw her again, not only was her face even more beautiful, but she had also become pregnant. After hearing what the woman said, the man looked excited, and a smile gradually appeared on his face. "Is that true?" he asked. "Of course it is. You'll find out once you eat the dumplings." I couldn't help but laugh. The woman was right. Although our dumplings are expensive, the business is still booming, and that's the reason. Customers were starting to get impatient. So I went to the kitchen to hurry my mom. "Mom, are the dumplings ready? The customers have been waiting for nearly half an hour. Why aren't they done yet?" But there was no response from the kitchen. I called out again. "Mom, are you there? Are the dumplings ready?" Still, there was no answer. A sense of unease tightened my heart. What could have happened? I looked at the curtain gently swaying in front of the kitchen door and felt a strong urge to go in and check, but my mom usually forbids me from entering the kitchen casually. After a struggle within myself, I finally mustered the courage and decided to go in. Just as I was about to touch the curtain, my mom suddenly opened the kitchen door, lifted the curtain, and brought out a steaming plate of pork dumplings. She shoved the dumplings into my hands and scolded. "You little brat, are you trying to sneak into the kitchen to spy on how I make the pork dumplings? Listen, as long as you're not pregnant, you're not allowed in the kitchen. Even your sister can only come into the kitchen now that she's pregnant." As she spoke, she lightly tapped my head and then quickly added, "Hurry up and serve these 2 bowls of dumplings to the customers." I rubbed my head in grievance and took the dumplings over to the customers. However, as I bent down to hand them the pork dumplings, an unsettling feeling washed over me. The shape and sheen of the dumpling seemed fine, but the pale pink broth with floating shrimp made my heart tighten. While it smelled like usual, a subtle odd odor lingered if I sniffed closely. After working here for so long, I was absolutely familiar with the taste of the dumpling broth. Yet today, this bowl of soup had a hint of blood, which was hard to explain. Just then, I heard faint calls coming from the kitchen. Was that my sister's voice? But ever since her miscarriage, she had lost her ability to speak and couldn't say anything. Filled with doubt, I quietly slipped to the back of the kitchen door, pressed my ear against the wall, and tried to listen. Through the door, I heard her helplessly say, "Mom, just kill me, please. I really can't take it anymore." Then my mom's voice came through. "Sweet daughter, you have to understand your mother. If we don't sell dumplings, we can't survive. Listening to her words filled with helplessness and irritation, I felt even more confused. Just hold on a bit longer. Once your sister is pregnant, we'll be free. Free? What does that have to do with my sister's pregnancy? It was all too strange. Go to the storage room and get 4 pounds of pork. Our regulars will be coming soon. I suddenly recalled that my mom only sold 5 pounds of pork dumplings each day and went home as soon as they were sold out. I had never seen her or my sister go to the market for groceries, yet every day, I would find fresh pork filling appearing out of nowhere. Where did this pork come from? While I pondered these questions, the shop door swung open again. I saw that it was the regular customers my mom had mentioned. "Hey, little girl, tell your mom we're here for dumplings. Make sure to get 8 bowls, totaling 4 pounds. A thought flashed through my mind. This was my chance. I opened the kitchen door slightly and carefully observed, seeing my mom and sister in conversation. My mom said anxiously, "All right, enough talk. You have to do this, or I won't be polite anymore." Her tone was laced with anger and irritation, seemingly threatening my sister. What was going on? My sister shot her an angry glance but then lowered her head helplessly, submitting to my mom. She returned to her former silence, pulled out a knife and a basin, placing them on the table. Her eyes reflected numbness and humiliation as she gripped the knife, preparing for something. I couldn't help but hold my breath, tightly covering my mouth. Could it be that the fresh pork in our shop was tied to a truth I couldn't accept? The fear within me grew stronger. Just as I turned to leave, I accidentally kicked a potted plant by the door, the sound shattering the silence. My mom heard the noise and immediately came out, her gaze sharp as a knife locking onto me, and she closed the kitchen door behind her. "You're not eavesdropping again, are you?" Her eyes turned fierce because she hated my spying behavior the most. I pretended to be impatient as I replied, "The regulars are here, and they've been waiting a long time for their dumplings. I came to hurry things along." "All right, let the customers wait a bit longer and tell them the dumplings will be ready soon." She studied me, confirming that there was no movement from the kitchen. "Of course, I just got here." Seeing that I looked calm, she relaxed a little and instructed me to go back out and serve the customers. I returned to the front, still feeling anxious, but I felt a bit more at ease when I heard the door being locked behind me. The earlier experience had truly scared me half to death. I glanced at the broken potted plant and felt a shiver run through me. If my mom found out I had discovered my sister's secret and what had happened today, my fate would probably be no different from that of the plant. I quietly brought out the pork dumplings and placed them on the table of the regulars, but just as I was about to leave, someone suddenly grabbed my arm. I turned to see a man in a Taoist robe. He had a striking face and long hair held up with a peachwood hairpin, sitting next to the regulars. He must have been their friend. "Li Banzian, why are you holding onto this girl's hand?" The regular paused eating and pulled Li Banzian away. "Mr. M.O., what do you take this poor Taoist for?" Li Banzian released my hand, explaining, "I just found this dumpling a bit suspicious and wanted to hear the girl's opinion." "What's suspicious about it?" Mr. M.O. looked confused, and the other 2 companions had similar expressions. Li Banzian stared at the dumplings, seemingly noticing something. He slowly said, "This dumpling is surrounded by a chilling aura, and there's an accompanying foul smell. I fear this might not be made from ordinary meat." His tone carried a sense of caution as he carefully examined my expression, as if trying to find answers in my face. Mr. M.O. and his companions exchanged glances, looking at the delicious dumplings before them, and they all protested. "Master Li, what nonsense are you talking about? These dumplings smell fantastic. How could they possibly have a foul odor?" "Yeah, you haven't even tasted it. How can you say it's not made from ordinary meat?" Another companion joined in the questioning. "Li Banzian, you must be getting superstitious with all that Taoist ritual you do." One of the customers sneered. "I wouldn't dare eat this bowl of dumplings. It could harm my moral standing. I advise you not to eat them either. If something happens, don't blame me for not warning you." Li Banzian was very firm, causing Mr. Mo's group and a couple at the next table to pause their chopsticks, looking distressed. "What are you rambling about, you charlatan?" I shouted angrily at him. "There's nothing wrong with my family's dumplings." Although I indeed felt something was off, I couldn't let the other customers know, otherwise, our business would be ruined. Li Banzian smiled slightly. Whether I'm talking nonsense or not, miss, you know best. I forced a smile, but panic stirred inside me. Don't spread rumors here, that's against the law. I'm telling you, our shop is perfectly clean. At that moment, my mom heard the argument and stormed out of the kitchen in anger. What are you trying to do? Causing a scene? Lee Banzian looked at my mom, his tone serious. Madam, I can see that your brow is dark. You may have done many unkind things. Dark brow? Who would believe your baseless claims? If there were any problems with my dumplings, could we have stayed open for so many years? So many regulars have eaten here without any issues. I firmly countered without backing down. Mr. M.O., after all this time, what are you bringing people here for today? Are you just looking for trouble? My mom directed her ire at Mr. M.O. I suggest you stop eating my dumplings from now on, lest you damage your moral standing. Mr. M.O. picked up on the underlying tone in my mom's words and immediately stepped forward to pat Lee Banzian on the shoulder. Master Lee, I brought you here specifically to try these incredibly delicious dumplings. You can skip them if you want, but don't ruin it for me. After all, there are indeed miraculous effects to these dumplings. Exactly. This dumpling shop has been open for so many years without any problems, you must be overthinking it. One of Mr. Mo's companions chimed in. If you don't want to eat, that's fine by us, we still want to enjoy them. My mom didn't want to argue with the Taoist, so she simply ordered me to see him out. I escorted Lee Banzian to the door. He angrily shouted back inside. I'm trying to warn you for your own good. If you insist on eating them, whatever happens next is none of my business. With that, he adjusted his Taoist robe. I didn't want to bother with him anymore and walked straight back into the store. However, Lee Banzian grabbed my arm once more. Looking around to ensure no one was watching, he secretly pulled out a small yellow paper from his robe and slipped it into my hand, grinning. I believe that one day, miss, you will definitely open this paper. Why do you think I would keep this paper? Why would I open it? I asked, puzzled. Miss, you know your family's dumplings aren't ordinary. Lee Banzian paused, leaning closer to whisper in my ear. Whether you keep this or not is up to you, but I advise you to hold on to it, it could save your life. Late at night, I lay in bed tossing and turning, unable to sleep. My mind replayed the bloody taste of the pork dumplings, the mysteriously appearing filling, and my sister's strange behavior in the kitchen. Each incident wove together into an unsolvable knot. Where should I even begin? The next morning, I secretly went to the pharmacy and bought a bottle of sleeping pills, then mixed them into dinner. I claimed I had an upset stomach and asked to rest in my room, hiding in the bedroom and waiting for the pills to take effect. Mom, are you okay? Did you fall asleep? Sister, are you sleeping here too? I whispered, but neither of them moved, still slumped over the dining table. Cautiously, I bent down closer to my mom's body and heard her snoring softly. I then approached my sister and checked in the same way. Sure enough, my mom and sister remained unresponsive, and my guard finally dropped. I tiptoed into the kitchen and found it looked just as ordinary as ever, unremarkable. But I had a nagging feeling that this place concealed unknown secrets. If there were truly issues in the kitchen, my mom wouldn't go to such lengths to keep me out. So I calmed myself and searched thoroughly, but found no clues. Just as I was contemplating the situation, I suddenly noticed that there was a potted plant placed at the kitchen door. Though the flower pot and the type of plant were different, the position and direction were exactly the same as before. My mom usually didn't bother with plants. Why was there one in the store and in the same spot? Could the secret of the kitchen lie here? Filled with questions, I stepped closer to the kitchen door and gently moved the potted plant. Sure enough, I found a clue. The color of the specific floor tile was noticeably darker than the others, and the grout lines were wider, appearing quite loose. I knocked on it and discovered that it was hollow inside. Eagerly, I moved the tile aside, but was left disappointed. Inside was merely ordinary dirt. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that the dirt had an oddly pale pink hue. I took a little and sniffed it, faintly recalling a familiar scent. After racking my brain, I remembered this was the ash from the temple in our city. But why was there temple ash at the entrance to the kitchen of my family's dumpling shop? Just as I was puzzled, a dark shadow suddenly appeared behind me. I felt a sharp pain in my shoulder as someone pressed down on it. Oh no, would my mom discover me? But I hadn't fully recovered from the effects of the sleeping pills yet. I I stiffly turned around to see my sister, her face looking even paler. She didn't say anything, remaining silent, but I could see a hint of surprise in her eyes. "You don't have to pretend. I know you can talk," I said slowly. My sister was taken aback and then incredulously asked, "When did you find out?"
Sister, when I went to the kitchen yesterday, I overheard your conversation with Mom. Didn't you also take the sleeping pills I put in the food? How did you wake up?
I pressed eagerly.
I didn't take any.
She paused before continuing.
This morning I saw you sneak off to the pharmacy, and after you left, I asked the staff. The staff member is an old acquaintance of mine and didn't hide anything, so I told myself not to have dinner today.
Then why didn't you expose me? I challenged.
I just wanted to see what you were up to.
She smirked and squinted at me. I was shocked. My sister, who seemed cowardly on the surface, actually had the courage to sneak into the kitchen.
Aren't you afraid I'll tell Mom?
I provoked.
If you know, why don't you go tell her right now? Let her kill me if she wants.
She said helplessly, a fierce look in her eyes.
I hate her, why? And if you can talk, why are you pretending to be mute?
I asked, confused. Ever since my sister's child had passed away, she seemed like a different person. She coldly smiled and said,
As for why I'm pretending to be mute, you'll find out eventually. It's because I can only understand these things once I'm pregnant too.
Her words sent a chill through me. My sister continued, I remember you've been married to Lily for 2 years now. It's about time for you to have a child. She smiled oddly. I heard Lily is coming back from a business trip soon, so you better prepare well and not let us or Mom down. Finally, she leaned in close and whispered in my ear. If you get pregnant, our family's life will improve. Watching my sister's frail figure gradually fade away, my heart felt increasingly heavy. Why does everyone in the family want me to get pregnant? Lily is my husband. We met through an arranged marriage, and he is a great person who is very considerate of me. Even though he is 5 years older, our relationship is strong. This year, he is 28 years old, and it's our 2nd year of marriage. Lily had mentioned wanting children before, but I always firmly rejected him. He never pressured me, but I knew he had a desire to be a father, wanting to uncover the secrets behind the dumpling shop while fulfilling his own wish. After a long time of contemplation, I finally made my decision. On the day Lily returned from his business trip, I dressed up on purpose, taking off my apron and slipping into a dress that was gathering dust in my closet. I went to the salon to style my hair and even put on some perfume. Just when I was ready to head out to the airport to pick him up, my mom suddenly popped out from behind me. Daughter, I know you're going to see your husband, so I specially made you a bowl of pork dumplings to nourish you. She smiled widely, but her eyes held a strange and unfamiliar glint. Hurry, eat while it's hot. I guarantee you'll look radiant and glowing after eating these. She handed me the steaming pork dumplings. I took the dumplings but fell into deep thought. Normally, my mom would always remind us not to sneak bites of the dumplings sold in the shop. She never allowed us to eat the pork dumplings made at home, claiming that they were made from secret recipes and eating them would be too nourishing, fearing we would be overnourished. But today, she actively cooked dumplings for me. Under my mom's eager gaze, I picked up my chopsticks and hesitantly took a bite. The flavor of the pork dumplings was indeed as incredible as rumored. The moment I bit into it, the fresh flavor burst in my mouth, the dumpling skin was thin and the filling abundant, making it impossible to stop. I couldn't hold back, devouring one after another. In less than 10 minutes, I finished the bowl of pork dumplings completely, even the soup was gone, and a warm feeling spread throughout my body. It felt so comforting. Mom, these dumplings are so delicious. I want more, I said excitedly. My mom chuckled. If you like them, that's great. Once you're pregnant, I'll make you dumplings every day. She gently stroked my hair and said, My daughter, you look beautiful today, don't let me down. After picking up Lily, it was already evening. We had dinner together, and then I returned home, filled with anticipation and nervousness. There's a saying that absence makes the heart grow fonder, and I truly felt that today. Having not seen Lily for nearly 2 months, she looked fantastic today, making me feel incredibly comfortable. When the moment was right, I softly said to her, Let's do it inside this time. Lily looked at me incredulously, seemingly unable to believe my words. My mom stood by, grinning and nodding at her, clearly pleased with the situation. The next morning, we both felt refreshed. Lily held me close, her face full of satisfaction, promising to treat me well for a lifetime.
All right, I get it. You better get ready to go back to work,
I said, resting my head on her shoulder, feeling her warmth. We shared a tender moment before reluctantly separating. When I returned home, my mom saw the flush on my face and the smile I couldn't hide, immediately knowing what had happened. She took a bowl of pork dumplings from my sister and placed it in front of me, urging,
"Sit down and eat these dumplings. I specially had your sister make them. Eat them while they're hot."
"Darling, are you already pregnant?" she asked with a broad smile. I shyly nodded, and she said,
"That's great. Now you can focus on your pregnancy."
My mom beamed, completely oblivious to the confusion on my face.
"Mom, how do you know I'll definitely get pregnant this time?"
I asked curiously, puzzled by her confidence.
"Just trust your mom, this time it will definitely work,"
she said, almost greedily staring at my belly, her smile becoming even brighter.
"What are you talking about, Mom?"
I asked, confused.
"Nothing,"
she said, retracting her gaze. "Don't you love eating dumplings? From now on, you can have them every day." Originally, I felt happy, but then I remembered how she previously wouldn't allow me and my sister to eat pork dumplings. "Mom, didn't you say I shouldn't eat pork dumplings?" I asked. "I didn't let you eat them before because they were too nourishing for your body to handle. But now it's different. If you're pregnant, these dumplings are like a miracle cure for maintaining pregnancy. They'll only benefit your body." Sure enough, a month later, I confirmed my pregnancy. But I didn't feel the surprise I had imagined. Instead, I felt a wave of fear. My mom's words had come true, and this pregnancy didn't seem like a coincidence, setting off a creepy sense of dread that I didn't dare to explore further. I called Lily to tell her the news. She was overjoyed, immediately booking a flight for that night and even suggesting she might resign to stay home and support me through the pregnancy. When my mom found out I was pregnant, she couldn't stop grinning.
"This is wonderful. Finally, your sister and I can relax."
Speaking of my sister, I suddenly recalled something she had said a month ago.
"Mom, since I'm pregnant too, shouldn't you let me into the kitchen? The secret behind our dumplings can't stay hidden forever."
At that moment, I heard my mom sigh deeply on the phone. "All right, since you're pregnant, I need to fulfill my promise. You should head back to the dumpling shop. Your sister and I will be waiting for you there. We'll tell you everything you want to know so you can understand." When my mom saw me return, she exchanged a glance with my sister. Understanding immediately, my sister walked to the shop entrance and hung up the sign that indicated they were closed, then locked the door. My mom and sister led me to the storage room where the ingredients were kept. My sister skillfully moved aside a cabinet and knocked rhythmically on the wall 3 times. Bang, bang, bang. With the last knock, I heard a
whoosh,
and the wall actually opened up, revealing a hidden compartment that housed a statue I had never seen before. The statue emitted a strange, pale green glow, its terrifying expression and wide-open eyes sent shivers down my spine.
"Mom, how could there be such a scary statue here?"
I couldn't help but ask, terrified.
"Silence! You must not be disrespectful to Madame Siat."
My mom suddenly interrupted me, and along with my sister, they bowed deeply 3 times. I could hardly believe what was happening before my eyes. My mom slowly began to speak, her tone grave.
20 years ago, your dad and I started this dumpling shop, but the business was terrible. We often struggled to make ends meet, and the shop was on the verge of closing down. At that time, I was pregnant with your sister, and life was even more difficult."
Shocked, I questioned.
"What sister? Do I have another sister?"
In my memory, there were only my sister and me.
"Yes, you had a sister, but she passed away from illness when she was just a month old."
My mom said, choking on her words. "Your dad and I were heartbroken. Then, as if misfortune comes in waves, your dad died in a car accident while he was out buying supplies. That left just your sister and me. As a weak woman, I endured the pain of burying your dad, and it was then that I discovered the statue." She pointed at the statue and continued. "That night, I had a strange dream. Madame Siat appeared to me in the dream, saying that if I offered my closest loved ones to her, she would ensure my business flourished and that I would accumulate wealth." My mom's eyes began to well up with tears. "At that time, I had no income and had to take care of you and your sister. The dumpling shop was about to go under, and I was desperate, so I agreed to offer Madame Xia my offerings. She told me I had to place your father's and sister's ashes in the temple, facing the southwest direction of my shop, in order for her statue to be restored. I was rendered speechless. A thought flashed through my mind that potted plant is precisely in the southwest direction of our shop. And the ashes beneath it. I couldn't help but feel a wave of nausea rush over me, gagging as I couldn't bear to imagine it. At that moment, I almost regretted learning the secret of the dumpling shop. My mom didn't pause because of my discomfort and continued to speak, while my sister supported me, helping me breathe. I had no choice but to listen to her story. She said that after she followed the goddess's instructions to make the offerings, the business began to improve and life gradually got better. Madame Xia also said that if the heart's blood of the offering person was added, the effect would be even better. But to take this heart's blood, there were also rules to follow. One must remain silent for 6 months and bathe and draw blood every day. It made sense now why I remembered my mom not speaking for a long time when I was a child, her face pale. Later, she was able to talk again. She had told me it was due to illness. I had naively believed her, not knowing it was for this reason. Does that mean my sister also? I cautiously glanced at my sister, who silently nodded. Mom persevered for 6 months, and the business improved more and more as she became increasingly devout in her offerings to Madame Xia, and money was no longer an issue for our family. My mom sighed. You've grown up, but I'm getting older and want to retire. However, Madame Xia insisted that the offerings must continue, or our family would face disaster. Inviting the deity is easy, but sending them away is difficult. She said the next heir who could bear children must be found to continue making offerings. My sister had once been pregnant, and this filled me with unease. Could she be the current heir? I pondered silently. Confronted with my mom's worries, I spoke earnestly. Mom, you're too tired, you don't have to go on like this. But my mom insisted. I can only place my hopes on your sister. So that was why, at 23, when my sister was pressured into arranged marriages, she did everything she could to get pregnant, hoping to inherit my legacy.
How could you do this? She's your own daughter. You would use her like this for your own peace of mind?
I countered in shock, unable to accept this reality. I've raised your sister for so many years, she should repay me. My mom answered, indignant. However, she said this without noticing my sister's tightly clenched fists and her slightly trembling body. She continued.
But the ceremony for changing the heir is extremely complex. The new heir must place her blood on Madame Xia's statue and offer her closest loved ones to her. Like I did, the new heir must bathe daily, keep quiet for 6 months, and draw her own heart's blood.
I was struck by a horrifying thought.
Then the ashes buried at the kitchen door aren't they my sister's child? Yes, buried there are not only my child's ashes, but also my husband's.
My sister's cold voice came from behind.
The new heir must provide the ashes of her closest loved ones. Therefore, my beloved, your brother-in-law, died unexpectedly soon after I got pregnant. And my closest loved one, your nephew, also passed away just a month after birth. Their ashes are buried under the potted plant at the kitchen door.
My sister coldly accused. To fulfill the transfer of the heir ceremony, I had to endure the pain of losing both my father and my child, and I had to bear the pain of drawing blood. Do you know how much I wanted to die these past 6 months? I truly wanted to join my child and husband every minute, every second. As she spoke, tears streamed down her face, and the mix of grievance and pain etched on her features was heartbreaking. Just when I thought she would continue crying, my sister suddenly leaned closer to me, revealing a twisted smile. My dear sister, do you know how jealous I am of you? Why must I bear all of this while you get to live happily? But fortunately, heaven has opened its eyes. I can soon be free. She stroked my face, her smile shadowy. My dear sister, it will be your turn to experience this hellish pain. I stood frozen in place, a foreboding feeling growing in my heart. Looking down at my belly, I even regretted bringing this child into the world. That useless one became the new heir, and not long after, developed cancer, unable to live for another year. My mom's tone suddenly shifted. But I still have you, my little daughter. Her laughter suddenly grew louder, her expression twisted and mad. I've secretly poured your blood onto Madame Xia's statue. Now that you're pregnant, once the child is born, we'll sacrifice it to Madame Xia, and everything will fall into place. Then you will become the new heir of our family. My mom's words struck me like a heavy blow. Mom, the child in my womb is your grandchild. I couldn't help but tear up. That's a life. How can you do this? My mom's expression suddenly darkened.
But your sister's child was also offered to Madame Xia. This is a great honor.
I stood there stunned, fear gripping my heart as I stared at my mom's familiar yet strange face, her words sending chills down my spine. At that moment, my relationship with her felt more distant than ever. I lay in bed, tossing and turning, unable to sleep. I found it hard to digest what had happened today, my heart aching for my child, who hadn't even been born yet and had already been doomed. I opened WeChat, wanting to chat with my husband, but strangely, after sending more than a dozen messages, he hadn't replied. Just as I was puzzled, a news notification popped up.
There was a serious traffic accident at the airport tonight. The victim lost too much blood and died at the scene.
Trembling, I clicked on the accident news, and when I enlarged the scene's photo, I nearly blacked out from shock. That was my husband. The victim's suit was the one I had personally picked out for him. I collapsed to the ground, tears streaming down my face, and I cried until I fainted. I didn't know how long I had been unconscious, only that when I opened my eyes, I saw my sister sitting at the foot of my bed. Why are you here? I didn't want to see her. I was filled with disgust. I suppose you know about Lily now. I advise you to grieve. She continued. This is Madame Xia's doing. My husband also died mysteriously like this. My sister's words pierced my heart like a blade. So, what? Are you here to gloat? I lowered my head, unwilling to look at her. I've lost my husband, and in a year, I'll lose my child too, ending up like you. Are you satisfied now? I tried to sound strong, but the words felt like a dagger twisting in my heart. My sister gently supported me. I'm here to help you, and also to help myself. I looked at her in confusion, but she wore a smile that conveyed both determination and helplessness. Driven by curiosity, I observed her closely as she leaned in and whispered.
This is impossible, absolutely impossible. How could this happen?
Things were becoming more chaotic, and my head felt like it was going to explode. I looked at her in disbelief.
Believe it or not, sister, but this is the only way to protect the child in your womb. Even if you don't do it for yourself, you must think of the child,
she said, rising to leave. I staggered, holding my head, feeling immense pain. If what my sister said was true, how could I trust my mom's words? Did I have any other options? Would my child survive? No, this is my only child with Lily. I must protect him. I needed to be strong for my child's sake. I found the small piece of paper Li Banxian had given me before. Maybe it could really turn the tide. Following the address on the paper, I arrived at a secluded wooden house. Before long, Li Banxian returned. She seemed to have anticipated my visit and was not surprised by my arrival.
Miss, please come inside and talk.
I nodded and followed her into the house. As soon as I entered, I knelt down and said, Li Banxian, I'm sorry for my previous disrespect in the shop. I hope you can forgive me. I sincerely asked her to save my life. Li Banxian took a sip of tea and pursed her lips. I recounted everything that had happened to my family in detail. By the way, my sister also told me that my mom is lying to me, that everything she does is to ensure her own longevity. I'm truly distressed. I don't know who to believe anymore. What my mom said and what my sister said were completely different, and my head was almost splitting. Li Banxian slowly began to speak. When I entered your shop that day, I sensed it was shrouded in evil energy. I knew there must be some malevolent force at play. Your sister is correct. Your mother hasn't told you the whole truth. Li Banxian took an ancient book from the shelf to show me and continued. Madame Xia is an embodiment of extreme mean and malevolence. Those who worship her must sacrifice the ashes and heart's blood of their closest loved ones for her powers to increase, allowing them to enjoy wealth and prosperity. By the way, I have one question. I expressed my confusion. I found some ashes at the back of the kitchen door, and their color isn't right, it's pink. Upon hearing my words, Li Banxian furrowed her brow in contemplation. This is not good. Worshipping this evil deity requires sacrifices of loved ones' ashes. However, if it is mixed with temple incense ashes, it indicates your mother is not performing a normal offering but is using forbidden techniques to seek longevity. The color of the ashes is pink because it has been mixed with black dog blood. Combining black dog blood with ashes and temple incense ashes can greatly enhance the deity's power. It seems your mother's evil intentions have become stronger. She has sacrificed not only her own child and your sister's but now aims to sacrifice your child as well.
If what my mom says is false, then why would she harm my brother-in-law? They are certainly not her closest loved ones.
I continued to find it hard to believe. That's because your mother offered both your and your sister's blood to Madame Xia, who then took the lives of your loved ones to restore her own power. The more people Madame Xia harms, the more powerful she becomes, allowing your mother to achieve eternal life more quickly. As for the meat that appears out of nowhere in your shop, it is not divine meat, it is actually rotten meat. Li Banxian explained. However, consuming it will have shocking effects. Anyone who eats that meat gradually loses their lifespan, eventually leading to a tragic death. I hurriedly asked Li Banxian if there was any way to resolve these issues. She shook her head in disappointment. This being is born from human malice and cannot be killed. Even if her statue is destroyed, she can attach herself to other objects. She will only depart when all human malice disappears, otherwise, she will continue to exist. However, I do have a way to ensure your survival. At that moment, I began to doubt her intentions.
Why do you want to help me?
Li Banxian's expression immediately darkened, and she said bitterly, "Do you know why I understand Madame Xia so well? To tell you the truth, my master was killed by Madame Xia, which led to his death.
I have been inquiring about Madame Xia's whereabouts for years to avenge my master, and I finally found clues at your family's dumpling shop."
Li Banxian said with a hint of determination in her voice. The moment I saw the dark aura on your mother's forehead, I knew she had been making offerings to these evil beings. I admit I have selfish motives in helping you, but I can assure you that I only wish to eliminate Madame Xia and avenge my master. I felt hesitations in my heart, but I understood that I had no other choice but to trust her.
So what should I do?
You just need to cooperate with me, Li Banxian replied. I said in distress. But now I have to eat the dumplings my mom makes every day. I can't avoid it. Li Banxian seemed to gather her resolve, opening a drawer and rummaging through it until she finally produced a small bottle. This can protect your body from being affected. She placed the bottle in my hand and then took out a talisman, pulling a strand of her hair and placing it inside. You must keep this talisman safe and carry it with you. If my life is in danger, I can sense it and come to save you. All right, thank you, Master Li, I said gratefully. The next afternoon, my mother and I went to handle Li's funeral. At the moment I saw her, I felt an impulse to rush over and hold her. However, due to my desire for revenge, I had to restrain myself. I watched helplessly as she turned to ashes, my heart aching with pain. In contrast, my mother remained expressionless, her gaze flickering with what seemed like a dim satisfaction. She must have been overjoyed, believing she was one step closer to immortality. Holding Li's urn, I went to the temple and returned with a handful of incense ash. That evening, my mom took my sister and me to the storage room, respectfully opened the hidden compartment, and began the sacrificial ritual for Madame Xia.
You two, hurry up and set the offerings out.
She urged us fiercely, fearful that the ritual would be delayed. It turned out that my husband's ashes were just offerings in her eyes. I suppressed my anger and placed my husband's ashes and the incense ashes on the table, while my sister added the black dog blood. As the full moon rose, my mom gazed greedily at the items on the table, mumbling to herself continuously. Finally, she mixed together Li's ashes, the incense ash, and the bowl of black dog blood, carefully cradling her palms around the mixture as she approached the kitchen door. My sister and I moved aside the bricks buried underneath and placed the mixture containing the black dog blood into the hole. I felt as if I were in a trance, murmuring as I poured the ashes.
Madame Xia, the Heart's daughter, has placed the offering ash. Please ensure that I live long and prosper.
However, before she could rejoice for long, she suddenly vomited a large pool of blood onto the ground, looking eerie and mesmerizing under the moonlight. My sister and I exchanged glances and smiled, but my mom stared in disbelief at the pool of blood on the ground, shocked as she asked,
How could it fail? How is that possible?
She struggled to stand up, angrily pointing at us and cursing.
It has to be you two bitches messing things up, otherwise, how could the sacrifice have possibly failed?
Yeah, we're the ones messing it up, I admitted without hesitation.
Mom, your dream of immortality is probably about to shatter.
My mom's eyes widened in disbelief as she looked at us.
I thought I had hidden it well.
She gasped, then, in a fit of rage, spat out another mouthful of blood.
If you want to keep something hidden from others, you must not engage in it yourself.
My sister spoke slowly.
Mom, you've committed so many sins, it's time you paid for them.
She continued.
Li Banzian told me before that if the sacrificial ritual fails, my mom would suffer a backlash and die from spitting blood. That's why my sister and I secretly replaced the bowl of black dog blood with pig's blood, ensuring the sacrificial ritual would fail. I can't believe I raised you two for nothing.
My mom wiped her mouth, twisted her face in anger, and said, "Now that I'm experiencing backlash, I certainly won't survive. But I can't die for nothing. I want you both to accompany me to hell." I didn't know where my mom got a fruit knife, but she charged straight at me. In this sudden situation, neither my sister nor I had anticipated it. Just as my mom was about to reach me, my sister quickly stepped in front of me. "Sister." I hugged her and cried out in desperation. "I'll call 120 and get an ambulance for you. And you too. You sisters should die with me." My mom was already furious. To save myself, I had to put my unconscious sister aside and retreat to the doorway. With no way out, my mom's knife was already very close. I squeezed the talisman in my hand and silently prayed. Why hasn't Master Li arrived yet? Am I really going to die here? Just at that critical moment, Li Banzian arrived, unexpectedly plunging a knife into my mom's heart, ending her life. Watching my mom breathe her last, I finally let out a sigh of relief and thanked Li Banzian. "Thank you so much, Master Li." He helped me up, then walked straight to kneel before Madame Xia. While he was distracted, I secretly took out my phone to send a message. However, when I approached Li Banzian, I saw that, like my mom, his eyes were filled with greed for Madame Xia, and an ominous premonition washed over me.
Master Li, what are you doing?
I hurriedly asked him. He didn't respond, but instead picked up Madame Xia's statue and suddenly burst into maniacal laughter. "Haha, Master, I told you I would succeed. Madame Xia is now in my hands. I can finally live forever."
Oh no, he tricked me.
My heart sank as I realized he was not seeking revenge but wanted to achieve immortality like my mom.
Li Banzian, you deceived me.
I couldn't help but shout.
Yes, I tricked you to get Madame Xia.
A fierce glint flashed in his eyes. "Now that I have Madame Xia, you have no reason to live." Holding onto the statue, he raised the knife and approached me. Under the pale moonlight, Li Banzian looked exceptionally terrifying.
Don't come closer!
I screamed, feeling a mix of despair and fear. With red eyes, Li Banzian raised the knife above my abdomen. I tightly shut my eyes, waiting for death to arrive. However, the expected knife did not strike me. When I opened my eyes, I saw police officers had arrived and were restraining Li Banzian on the ground. I finally realized the sound of sirens outside, and as exhaustion washed over me, I collapsed, tears streaming down my face. I was finally safe, everything had settled. My sister was treated successfully and stayed in the hospital for a few days, while Madame Xia was taken by the police for investigation. Li Banzian was sentenced to prison for the intentional murder of my mom, and in the process, the police also solved a murder case from over a decade ago. It turned out that Li Banzian had killed his master and then fled to escape the consequences, leaving that case unsolved due to insufficient evidence. Later, I visited Li Banzian in prison. When he saw me, he questioned with agitation.
When did you report to the police?
I replied.
It was when you became so engrossed with Madame Xia that I secretly sent a message to the police. Where did I give myself away?
He asked furiously.
When I went to the cabin to find you, I saw your room was filled with ancient books seeking immortality and so many health tonic pills. You initially said Madame Xia was born from human malice and could never be eradicated, but then you claimed you could eliminate Madame Xia. Doesn't that contradict itself?
I spoke bluntly.
I wouldn't have doubted you at first, but my suspicion solidified when I saw the same greedy look in your eyes for Madame Xia as I saw in my mom's.
After I finished speaking, I ignored Li Banzian's curses and turned to leave. As I exited the prison, the blue sky and lush trees finally brought a sense of calm to my heart. Half a month later, I sold the family's dumpling shop and moved with my child and sister to another city, leaving behind this place. We settled into a new home, and life gradually became stable. 8 months later, I gave birth to my child with Lili, a boy who looked so much like him. When the child was 1 year old, my sister sadly succumbed to the torment of illness. At her funeral, my child and I cried heartbrokenly. For the sake of my child, I desperately wiped away my tears, but when I looked up, I was so frightened that cold sweat broke out all over my body, and I fell to the ground. I saw that on the table in the funeral parlor was a statue emitting a green glow. It was Madame Xia, and she was quietly smiling at me.